Dante DiVincenzo potentially out for the season. How does this affect Minnesota?
I mean, their 3-point shooting is going to be in shambles. He started to cook once they put him in the lineup.
He's been playing really well.
Last 2 months he's played really well.
So it's obviously a huge bummer for them. I think the season's cooked. I'm not saying just because Dante DiVincenzo. I'm just talking like as a whole for their lack of spacing, their offense. Even in games where Naz Reid and Anthony Edwards have it going, you can't win a game that you were up in against. I know Memphis is still one of the better teams, but these are games that you got to close. Yep. You have one of the better players in the league in Anthony Edwards. Naz Reid, when he has it going like that, had 15 in the fourth quarter. I know I'm singling out one game.
At what point do we just start looking at Chris Finch for not playing the right lineups in these closing minutes?
We've been talking about Chris Finch all season long.
He's been playing Rob more too, so I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah, but he had 17 and 15 minutes, and he didn't play in the fourth.
I'm not saying it's perfect.
I just think that we keep saying this, we need an initiator on this offense. It just comes back to that for me, and we just need consistency on the offensive side. Once you get that, the Wolves will be back and we'll be happy about their progress moving forward. But until they get that, I can't feel overly high on the Wolves.
I feel like this is best case scenario for the Timberwolves. Dante getting hurt. It's gonna sound rude, but I feel like it forces it forces Chris Finch's hand into actually playing the young talent on the team.
That's a fact.
Right. Like now, Dante those minutes are not gonna be there no more. They're gonna go to somebody, whether it's Rob Dillingham or Josh Minott or Terrence Shannon Jr. One of those three will benefit from it, and I think Rob Dillingham will be the beneficiary of those minutes, and he can fill a void that Dante didn't with the playmaking and the ball handling. It just takes a lot of stress off of Anthony Edwards, and I think this season, more than anything, I think it is cooked. I think their chances of competing for a championship are non-existent. I don't think this is a high-level playoff team. When they traded Cat, I thought the move pretty much signaled that they want to rebuild and just retain their good role players for the long term. And right now, the most important thing is developing your younger talent that's going to be here for the next couple of years and seeing who that can be. So Rob Dillingham, I mean, him being a top 10 pick and not getting consistent minutes, that was always an issue. But now with Dante being out, it just makes it much easier. And I think at some point, they got to trade Julius Randle. I don't think nobody wants Julius Randle, but they got to try as hard as possible to get Julius Randle off the team, because it's not always like this, but it is like this 50% of the time, and this was like it with the Knicks as well. Every other year, Julius Randle plays terrible. This is like with the Wolves. Last year with the Knicks, Julius Randle was pretty good for us, especially once we got OG. He was a big part of what we did. But the year before, he was kind of up and down. The year before that, he was really bad. And I think this is one of his bad seasons. And when he plays like this, he is pretty much a dark cloud over the team, and he is just terrible vibes, and he just brings terrible energy.
What do you think the combo of Julius Randle and AD looks like? Do you think it'll work?
I don't.
I'm being dead serious.
That's not the move.
Would it work?
I don't know if Julius Randle is going to work anywhere.
Get another big, another guy that can rebound the basketball.
I mean, he's best when he's like Randle
the ball.
Is the number one for the most part. Like he did work some with Brunson, but also once Randle went out, that's when you guys were running that crazy.
I think Julius Randle, his perfect fit is a team that has little to no expectations. That's in the mud. That's it. Like I think the Hornets would be great for him.
Hornets would move me.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think a young team that wants to inject some talent to maybe make a play-in push. I think that's like the perfect.
Do you
team
think he would be a
Randle.
poison in Detroit?
I'd rather have Tobias. I'd rather stay with Tobias.
I mean, like I know Detroit's on the rise. Do you think that's one of that's a cheap option for them?
Like looking at the teams, really. Like I'm looking at the Eastern Conference. Washington, no. Toronto, no. I really just think Charlotte is like the only team that it makes somewhat sense for him to go to.
Toronto, I don't hate.
Post
Scotty Barnes,
Jimmy
RJ
World,
Barrett.
he goes to Miami. He's not really a Heat culture guy.
That makes sense somewhat if you move off of Jimmy and you just want to maybe stay competitive.
Yeah, I can see that.
But there are very few teams that Julius Randle actually makes sense on. But
I don't hate the Heat, actually.
He's just a dark cloud right now for the Wolves. But now with Dante's injury, those minutes open up for Dillingham. And when Dillingham has been on the court, he's shown what he can do. And that's why it's been so frustrating, because Chris Finch sees what he can do and doesn't play him, and they excuse it by saying, oh, defensive liability, this and that. Like, man, you just need somebody that can handle the ball and get buckets. And that's what Dillingham does.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to go as far to say this is best case scenario or good case because
I understand the sentiment.
yeah, but Dante's been playing really well as a starter. He's averaging 15 this last like 8 games or so. He's averaging 15, 40% from 3, 3% from the field. Of course, taking mostly threes, but he's been really good these last 7 or 8 games when he's been injected into the starting lineup. And this team has needed offense, but I mean, the bigger issue here is Julius Randle. Like the experiment, the trade, whatever you want to call it, it's another failure, right? Like I understand the sentiment behind it where, okay, in the future, you'll have more cap space and you'll be able to have all this flexibility and whatnot. But it stings when Karl-Anthony Towns is over there in New York putting up career numbers and the vibes over in New York are fantastic and you're the number 3 seed and everything else that has gone into Karl-Anthony Towns having such a great year. And on the other hand, you have Julius Randle just not really able to hold up his end of the bargain. For Dante himself, though, it is bad because to start off the year, he was so terrible. Right? Remember those October numbers? It was gross. I mean, under 30% from 3. It was really ugly. So it was good to see him finally get into a rhythm. Like you mentioned, Joel, he had been playing better in general over these last couple of months, but specifically as a starter, he's been playing probably his best basketball. So right when things are starting to flow, he goes out. But I agree with you. I mean, the problems are beyond Julius Randle, too. I think you could look at Chris Finch, like you mentioned, the Rob Dillingham kind of sporadic minutes. And Anthony Edwards fucks with Rob. You could tell, like in the post-game interview, Anthony Edwards went over to Rob when he was interviewing him. He's like, yeah, this is like my little bro here. And Rob embraces that too. So it's obvious Ant is like trying to push for it because Ant understands too that this team needs some juice offensively. Like shout out to Mike Conley, everything he does. But as a point guard that actually has some juice and some scoring capability, that's really what Minnesota needs. They have a lot of issues on offense. It's not just that, the spacing, Julius Randle, what Gobert limits you, what Jaden limits you. There's a lot of issues that go beyond just 1 or 2 players. But I think having Rob, having some of these younger players involved is going to help. But big picture, it's hard to see Minnesota as anything more than like a first-round exit team.
Right, absolutely. I think this injury absolutely blows because of how well he was playing, how important his role can be. Obviously, with the starting lineup, it's not a good fit with Randle and Gobert. And I think they made that move, and we've talked about this before, because of the ownership situation in Minnesota, right? They had their deal, which was supposed to be installments with Alex Rodriguez, your guy, and Mark Lowry basically put on hold because Glenn Taylor pulled back and said, I don't think you guys have the necessary cash to actually pay and buy this team. So then you look at the situation where
it's insane.
You have Karl-Anthony Towns getting $60 million a year, and they basically said, we're not certain that we can pay that luxury tax down the line. We're going to trade him now for multiple players and then have the affordability to extend multiple guys moving forward. And that put them in this situation, this season where it's a transitional year. It's a developmental season. It's an opportunity to develop guys like Rob Dillingham and utilize Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker more. But all of these guys are coming off the bench. But the starters themselves have not clicked this season because Cat last year was the glue that put it all together, right? Their first year at Gobert, he was sick to start the season. He missed time. Last year, they had the chemistry. Cat did a lot of the little things that Randle has really not. And Randle is a player who still has the same exact strengths that he had with the Knicks. The difference is those have not been highlighted because of the fact that he needs to be in a spot where there's a lot of space and he gets a lot of open threes for his teammates. He's a good playmaker, but he's a post-centric player and really a mid-range assassin. He can be that interior player where he can get you efficient, and I wouldn't really say efficient as much as he'll produce for you. But you need to put him in a situation where it's really going to maximize him as a playmaker. But with Jaden, with Rudy Gobert, and then Mike Conley, slow start to the year too, it's just really not an ideal group. There's no juice and there's no secondary creation.
And you got Ant 0 for 12 on game-winning go-ahead baskets inside the game.
The only person
Yeah,
that's
I
worse
knew
is
this was
LeBron.
coming. Like you shouldn't have brought it up. I didn't bring it up on purpose.
Well, I don't
No,
give a
the
fuck
only
about
person
LeBron.
is LeBron that has, so
Yeah,
worse
it's tough.
at his shot. So, that just basically means that he's on the right trajectory.
Well, no, it's not. It's LeBron. Since Ant has gone into the league, the only one that has worse attempts is LeBron.
No, LeBron started his career 0 for 19.
Was it his start of his career? I thought it was since he entered the league.
Yeah, on go ahead, like game time buckets. That's why the narrative of LeBron not being like
Clutch
started.
Yeah, that was stupid.
Yeah, so 0 for 19. So, Ant's on the right path. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Just make sure.
I think the Timberwolves are pretty much.
Okay, I thought so. Anthony Edwards is now 0 for 12 on go-ahead / game-tying field goals in the last 5 seconds of fourth quarters, or overtime. LeBron's the only other player with more attempts without a make since Ant was drafted.
It's funny because like all of those numbers, like obviously Overtalk hasn't hit
So
shit.
LeBron hasn't made those
Since
shots.
he was drafted, he's 0 for 19.
I feel like he's made those shots.
I know, so have I.
But all of those numbers are low. Like you look at those, like you do that in like fucking Pro Basketball Reference or whatever. It's
Nobody's
like,
efficient.
It's like there's like 2 people above like 40%.
Yeah, but you know that moment that Ant hits that shot is gonna be special, man.
He's due.
It's gonna be special.
He is due.
I feel like the Timberwolves have completely botched building around Anthony Edwards. It's gonna be tough because when he was first drafted to the team got the first overall pick because of some injuries, not because they lacked talent.
Yeah.
So you already had Ant drafted to a team that had Karl-Anthony Towns, and then they had D'Lo as well, and they accelerated the rebuild by trading for Rudy Gobert. So they traded multiple first-round picks to go get him. The first year, we have to remember, like what the Wolves are experiencing is pretty much how the first year with Cat and Rudy Gobert felt like. Like this, it felt like it was a disaster. Everything was bad. I think this is an even worse situation because now that we've seen them make the conference finals, they trade Cat, and really, what's the flexibility you have outside of cap space for your team? You don't have draft picks, so even if the Timberwolves are bad, they're not going to get a top pick in the draft. And the flexibility with the cap space, if you re-sign Naz Reid and Alexander Walker, and you still have Ant and Jaden and Gobert, you don't really have that much cap space to even work with anyway in the offseason unless you trade off Gobert or Jaden. It's going to be really hard to build around Anthony Edwards. Like, they basically need to bank on all their current young players right now becoming good NBA players. Not just Dillingham. Like, Dillingham actually has to become like an all-star. The other players have to become serviceable. Like, Terrence Shannon Jr. has to become a good rotational player. Like, in order for this trade not to go down as a disaster.
Yeah, like, God forbid Jaden McDaniels worked on his offensive game.
I mean, with Julius Randle taking so many shots, he can't really do that.
Now it's
not put in a situation.
there.
But that was my biggest concern about this trade was outside of if I was a Timberwolves fan, I'd be pissed because you just made the conference finals. Now you're trading our second best player.
So stupid.
But beyond that, it's cap space. It's hypothetical, man, because you have cap space and you have the possibility to make moves, but you have to make the right moves. Like the 76ers this past offseason, they made all the right moves. They opened up a max slot. They got Paul George, and now they're having their worst season in probably the Embiid era where they're like the fucking 8 seed or some shit. I guess they were the 8 seed last year, but they were majority of the season out of the fucking play-in.
Yeah.
So like having all this cap space and this flexibility and all this stuff sounds good. And in 2K, when you could go and sign a 90 overall player and that means your team gets better, that works. But in the real NBA, you have to find players that are going to fit a team that you have to give good contracts to, because if you give a bad contract to them, you're not going to be able to move off of them. So you're really banking on the Timberwolves and their front office and ownership and all of these leadership positions to make the right moves. And I get why you trust them, because last season they made the conference championship and it looked like the Gobert trade was good and Cat was good and all of this. You know, the younger places like Naz Reid and Nikhil and Jaden have all hit. But now it's time to take a next step because you took a step back. You can't stay here. You took a step back to take 2 steps forward, and it doesn't look like right now they're going to be able to do that.
Would we still be having this conversation at the cap? Not right now, but I feel like in the playoffs we would still.
Low-key, they were damned if they do, damned if they don't, John.
Yeah, because I'll be honest, if Cat's on this team right now, I think that, I mean, last year when we had the topic about what top 4 seed in the West is the biggest pretender, Minnesota was by far and away everybody's answer. So I think Minnesota, even this year, we all looked at as a team that wasn't gonna win the championship. And
No, we said the Clippers.
But the top 4.
I thought most of them
weren't they?
Top 4 was, I think it was the Nuggets,
OKC,
Minnesota, and I think did Dallas eventually get the top 4 seed?
They did,
They were
and
5, I think.
they were all right. So because I remember, regardless,
Clippers were 4.
Forget about it. I'm sorry for even saying that. The sentiment's right though. We didn't have much expectation for them come playoff time. That's the sentiment.
And if they didn't trade
Clippers
Cat,
were 4.
then Naz Reid leaves, Nikhil Alexander Walker leaves, and I mean it's an all-star for 2 like role players, and Naz Reid, I know is upper level, but still, you know,
Naz Reid balls.
they would have still needed
Damn straight.
their young players to develop, but I don't know. It's just they're kind of stuck, like you said. It didn't matter what kind of direction they went in. This was the bullet that they were eventually going to bite. They're just biting it much
I
earlier.
think it just also hurts that Julius Randle was like the main piece that you got back to.
It also hurts because Cat's having the best year of his
He's a
career.
depreciating asset.
Cat
If-
looks fucking awesome.
If the team wasn't half on sale and ownership wasn't a question, Cat would still be on the team right now.